Hello everyone, and welcome to a really insane game from round 11 of the 2018 Candidates Tournament, and I was actually planning on showing you this game about 4 hours ago. That's probably about the time this game should have ended, but it only ended now, and you'll see how many weird opportunities happened on the board and how many great opportunities were missed. So it's round 11, Liren with the white pieces against Alexander Grischuk. And let's just see this game. Uh, let's see some of the photos before we do. Here we have a nice photo of Grischuk. These are all photos from round 11. Here we have a nice close-up of Ding, and also here we have another nice close-up of Alexander. So let's see this game. We have c4, c5, so the English opening, symmetrical variation, knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, and knight to c6, the four knights opening of the English. E3, e6, d4, d5, so transposing into the symmetrical variation of the Tarrasch defense. We have a3, d captures on c4, bishop captures on c4, and now a6, preparing b5. White castles, we have b5, bishop to a2, and bishop to b7. So both sides simply developing. Queen to e2, we have queen to c7, bishop to d2, bishop to e7, rook to c1, and now c4. Locking this bishop out of the way. White will reactivate it with bishop to b1, but black will get a nice outpost for his knight here on b3. So e4, rook to d8, and now bishop to e3. Here we have knight to g4, preparing to capture this bishop on e3, as this is it is and will be a pretty powerful piece, and also it kind of prevents this knight on f3 from moving for the time being, as queen captures on h2 would be a terrible threat. So e5. We have knight to a5, and this knight to a5 was premature by Grischuk, and here Ding really takes his opportunity to improve the position. And now this was the idea, knight a5, then coming to b3, but this actually allows the bishop to f4, and this bishop to f4 is a massive improvement on Ding's position. As the knight is on a5, it's no longer attacking the d4 pawn, so white doesn't have to defend it with two pieces. And now knight captures on e3 is no longer possible. Now the knight on g4 definitely looks a bit silly. And Sviller really gave a nice explanation of why this happens, even in strong Grandmaster games. You simply think to yourself, okay, at some point I will definitely capture on e3, and you stop thinking about it. Then you play knight to a5, and you see a move like bishop to f4, and now you just, what's the knight gonna do on g4? But okay, queen to b6, now we have rook c to d1, defending the d4 pawn as the queen attacked it. We have h5 and h3 now, kicking away the knight. Knight has to go all the way to h6, and now reactivating this bishop to b1, knight to b3, and now bishop back to e3, preparing ideas like d5 with an attack on the queen on b6. So queen to c7 getting out of the way, and now rook f to e1, developing the other rook as well. And here now black does have a problem, because he didn't exchange this knight for a bishop on e3. Now his knight is terribly placed on h6. Black can't really afford to castle here. If you castle, simply bishop captures on h6, your whole king set is already busted. It's a terrible position for black. So instead, Grischuk goes for king to f8 here. And we have d5. The king is still kind of in the center of the board. You don't want to allow that rook on h8 to get into the game, and the position is definitely full of potential for attacking. So d5, we have e captures on d5, and now the immediate e6. F captures on e6, and now knight to g5. And already there's a threat of knight captures on e6 with the check and the fork on the queen. This would win the game immediately. And Grischuk defends it with queen to d7. There also was an idea of playing bishop captures on g5, but after bishop captures on g5, you're simply having too much fun here with white. Rook moves as the rook is attacked, and now this bishop is coming to g6, or you could simply play knight captures on d5. There are too many back rank threats here and weaknesses. So after knight to g5, queen to d7 was played, and here bishop to g6. And here, bishop to f6 was played. Another idea is knight to f5, with the idea of exchanging knight for a bishop, now this time for real, then maybe exchanging bishop for knight here, exchanging pieces, you know, alleviating the pressure. But after knight to f7, attacking both rooks, and d4, now attacking knight and bishop. Bishop captures, queen captures, you'd get bishop captures on f5, pawn captures, and now bishop captures on d4. And black's idea was queen to c6, now threatening checkmate on g2. But here white has knight to d5, and white is better here. You can never capture here. If you capture, you get queen to e8 checkmate. Again, back rank weaknesses, and Grischuk didn't enjoy this variation. So after this bishop to g6, he didn't go for knight to f5. He went bishop to f6, and here he missed this bishop to b6 move, simply attacking the rook. And the idea is that it doesn't matter that the knight on g5 is unprotected, because this was Ding's idea. The idea, if Grischuk plays bishop captures on g5, and then you have bishop captures and bishop captures, it seems like you just won 2 pieces for a rook. But here comes queen captures on e6, with the terrible threat of queen to e8 checkmate. After the queen is exchanged, the rook will checkmate. Then after queen captures, rook captures, again there's the threat of checkmate here. And now after bishop blocks, now comes rook captures on d5, again with the threat of rook to d8 check, bishop captures, check, bishop captures, and then again rook to e8 checkmate. So bishop captures, now knight captures, and here black is without a move. White will simply capture this bishop and then checkmate the black king, or black will simply lose too much material. So a brilliant idea by Ding. So after this bishop to b6, Grischuk doesn't go for this variation, as he sees the back rank weaknesses are too grave. Rook to c8 was played. Here we have knight captures on e6 with check, king to g8, only move that's not extremely terrible. And here we have knight captures on d5, bishop captures on d5, and this is the critical moment in the game. This is why I say that the game could have ended right here, right now. In this position, there are a lot of moves that are winning, but Ding plays the one that's the least winning of them all. Here he played knight to f4, and it's an interesting move, and it also wins, but Grischuk totally confused him here. The move that's completely winning, and feel free to pause the video if you haven't seen the game, try to find it. I will show a couple of them that are winning. For those of you who found it, congratulations, you are an excellent player. And for those of you who want to enjoy the show, here knight to d8 wins the game. You simply prevent this rook from eyeing d8 square. The threat is once again queen to e8, followed by queen captures and rook captures with checkmate. So after you capture the knight, now comes rook captures on d5, and black doesn't have a move. If you capture the rook, again, simply queen e8 check, this is checkmate. And it doesn't seem that difficult to find, because Ding did play this bishop to g6, obviously with the idea of putting something on e8. And even if you didn't find knight to d8, then rook captures on d5 immediately is just as winning. Queen captures, and now again knight to d8, simply blocking this rook, and queen to e8 will again be checkmate. And if you block with queen e5, it doesn't matter, simply queen captures, bishop captures, rook captures, and again you're threatening rook to e8 checkmate. After rook captures here, bishop captures, and again you're threatening rook to e8 checkmate. There is no stopping this. So interesting how Ding missed all of these ideas. But it is round 11, all of them are very tired, but he is very young, he shouldn't have problems, with fatigue. But okay, he played knight to f4, and probably he thought that this move was just as winning. Now there's a double attack on the bishop here, and it definitely seems like black should just resign here. There are simply too many threats. Again, rook captures here is coming, the threats of queen to e8 are still here, but here Grischuk totally confused him. Here Grischuk played knight to c1. He simply attacked his queen on e2, and you do have to play something here. Now, you could simply capture the knight. Capturing the knight with the rook is winning for white. Playing queen to e3, simply getting the queen out of the way, Also, next move you will capture here. You also protect your bishop on b6 if black decides to do something against that. So after knight to d3, getting the knight away from c1, now simply knight captures on d5, and again, completely winning game for white. You can't capture because again comes queen to e8. But after this knight to c1, Grischuk completely confused Liren, and here queen captures on h5 was played. Knight to d3, and now knight captures on d5. But now it's a bit different. Now knight to f7, and here Grischuk yet again confuses Ding. Here queen to e2 was played by Ding, but white is again winning in this position, and it's a forced variation. So again, it's very funny how Ding didn't see it. Knight captures on f6 with check. Pawn captures, and now bishop captures on f7 with check. Queen captures, and now queen to g4 check. A very important check, checking the king and eyeing the rook on c8. So only move for you not to lose this rook is king to h7. And after king to h7, queen to f5 check. Now you can't go queen g6 because of rook to e7 check. You have to move the king to g7. You can't go to the back rank because you again lose the rook on c8. And here rook to e4 with the idea of rook to g4. Black would have to get this rook into the game, and now rook to g4 check, king moves, and now rook to h4. Preparing ideas like rook to h8. King stops, and now comes the bishop to e3. So now the bishop will also be able to check the king on the h8 square. Rook to d8, getting ready to move this knight and maybe capture on d1. But now rook to g4 check, king f8, and bishop to h6 check. King to e7 and queen rook to g7. This wins the queen and the game. So it's a pretty long variation, 10 moves, but all of the ideas are forced when you see that the queen from g4 will be checking the king and eyeing the rook on c8. Then you do have time to bring the rook into the game. But okay, after knight to f7, queen to e2 was played, and here knight f to e5. Bishop to e4, as now the bishop has to move from g6. We have rook to h4 and f4 by Ding. Rook captures on f4, knight captures on f4, and knight captures on f4. With the idea that if now rook captures queen, then knight will capture queen. So first bishop to h7 check. With the idea that if king captures, queen e4 check. Now black really does lose the queen. So after bishop to h7 check, king to h8 was played. Now queen to e4, and the black queen is still attacked. Queen to c6, offering a trade of queens, and now bishop to d4. And here black can play knight e to d3, with bishop captures, queen captures, and with two powerful knights placed like this, Grischuk would definitely have compensation for the exchange. This queen can always come to b6 to deliver check, also to b8 will be covering g1 and h2 nicely from there. But after bishop to d4, now Grischuk goes for knight captures on h3 with check. With the idea that if you capture, then comes knight to f3 check. You can't capture it because the knight is protected. But this would also be fine for white. But after this knight captures on h3, Ding isn't interested. He plays king to h2, and now knight back to g5, attacking the queen. Queen captures on c6, rook captures on c6, and now bishop to c2. And now out of all that mess, you have an ending where Ding is up the exchange, but Grischuk is up a pawn, and his pieces are very active. So white is slightly better here, but from being in a completely winning position on that move when he could have played knight to d8, it's really a hard blow for Ding, especially when he sees what he did. Here knight g to f7 was played. You could also play knight g to f3 check, with the idea that if pawn captures, now knight captures, king moves, and now you have a problem. If knight captures on e1 with check, rook captures, you don't have the option of playing bishop captures on d4. It does seem to be like a great move because you get rook to e8, again checkmate. So a lot of rook to e8 checkmate ideas in this game. So after bishop to c2, knight g to f7, bishop captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and now rook to d5. Rook to e6 only move as the knight was attacked. King to h3, we have king to g8, b3 now, king to f7, b captures on c4, knight captures on c4, rook to d7 check, bishop to e7, and now rook captures on e6, king captures and rook to a7. So a lot of simplifications. We have knight captures on a3, rook captures on a6 with check, king to d5, and now bishop to h7, knight to c4, king to g4, and now bishop to f6, rook to a7, and now king to d4. And now you'll see that although white is still up the exchange, the dark square bishop black has will be completely compensating for the exchange. Bishop to g8, we have knight to d6, king to f3, now king comes to c5, rook to a8, b4, king to e2, now bishop to c3, and now you see that the bishop from c3 is protecting the pawn on b4, also protecting the pawn on g7. Both of these pawns are on dark squares, so white can't challenge them with the bishop, and white can never capture them with the rook, because the bishop will simply capture rook. So it's impossible to win this position, but Ding did have much better position, and he definitely wants to try, so he will try. King d3, we have king to b6, king to e3, king to c6, king to f4. Now he will try to bring his king up the board. Knight to b7, king to f5, knight back to c5, g4 now, king to b5, g5, b3, king to g6, now comes king to b4, bishop to d5, bishop to d4, king to h7, king to c3, g6 now, pawn comes all the way to b2, and now bishop to a2, you do have to prevent the pawn from being promoted, king to c2, and now rook to b8. We have knight to e4, rook to b4 now. You definitely don't want to allow this rook to capture your bishop, so knight to c3. Now you can allow it, because now if rook captures and knight captures bishop, then black will obviously queen his pawn faster. So bishop to e6 now, with the idea that if you promote now, then you have this check here, picking up the pawn. So king to c1, getting out of the light square, and now bishop to f5, simply guarding b1. Bishop to e5, we have rook to b7, b1 with queen, bishop captures, knight captures, and rook captures on g7. Now, of course, you don't want to capture the rook. If you capture the rook, then this pawn will win the game. So knight to c3. But basically, black's plan is simple. He has this entire diagonal to simply use and move his bishop, so whenever the white rook attacks the bishop will simply move, and the white can never win this game. But Ding will still try. We have knight to c3, rook to e7, bishop to d4 now, rook to d7 attacking the bishop, bishop to e5, king to h6, king to c2, now comes king g5, king b3, king to f5, bishop to h8, and rook to b7 check. And this was a very interesting attempt by Ding Liren. Now, if, for example, if Grischuk tried king to c4 here, then king to c4 would indeed lose the game. Because now you have rook to h7 attacking the bishop. The only square available for the bishop is d4, and now you pin it here. Rook to h4, the bishop is pinned, and the king can march forward. If you move the king, simply rook captures, king captures, and now the g7 pawn is winning. So a very nice attempt. It was already about 6.5 hours, maybe 6 hours and 40 minutes since this game started. So definitely a valiant attempt. Maybe Grischuk will blunder, but he doesn't. King c2, rook to h7, now bishop moves, king to e6, king b3, rook to d7, bishop to h8, rook to d8, bishop to g7, king to f7, bishop to e5, rook to e8, bishop to d4. Still a lot of attempts here. Rook to b7, bishop to e5, rook to b6, bishop to d4, rook to f6, now blocking the bishop's coverage of the g7 square, but simply bishop captures. This was all calculated by Grischuk. King captures, knight to d5 check. We have king to f7 and knight to e3. And this knight to e3 is the only move that saves black. Any other move loses. So knight to e3. With the idea that if you push g7 now, you get knight to f5, simply threatening to capture the pawn, and if you promote it to a queen, then comes knight h6 check, and you lose the queen. King moves, captures, captures, and the game is drawn. So after knight to e3, Ding tried king to f6, simply stopping the knight, but now comes knight to d5 check. And again, if you attack the knight, you get knight to f4 check, picking up the pawn. So here, king to f7 was played again, knight back to e3, g7, and after knight to f5, they finally drew the game. So yeah, the variation is identical. Black will either capture or you will get a promotion here, and then knight to h6 check picks up the queen. So yeah, that's the game. Bare naked kings on move 99. Okay, the game didn't last till move 99. It was not this knight to f5. It was move 96. So 96 moves instead of a game that could have ended like a miniature. But yeah, that's the curse of Giri. It seems like in round 11, Liren once again drew his game, and he is 3 games away from pulling a Giri, which could be catastrophic. Every drawn game from then will probably be referred to as the Ding, which was now a Giri. But yeah, that's chess. Things happen. So yeah, I mean, I do hope you enjoyed it. It was an excellent game, and it was a game that lasted for over 7 hours, 7 hours and 20 minutes, I believe, or something like that. I mean, totally crazy. So yeah, once again, I would like to thank you all for watching, and once again, thanks Nikki for photos from this event, the 2018 Candidates Tournament. As usual, all of the links to her social media will be in the description below. Feel free to check out some of her work. And yeah, as usual, you can check all of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with another game from the candidates, and I will show you the final standings after round 11 in that video. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.